The artifact sat in the center of the containment field, doing absolutely nothing, which was, according to every scan we had run over the past 6 cycles, exactly what it was supposed to do. I tapped my secondary manipulator against the console, watching the energy readings flatline for the 100th time. My name is Vorth, and I am what the humans call a xenoarchaeologist. Though that term makes it sound far more exciting than it actually is. Most of my job involves staring at rocks that turn out to be just rocks, or examining ancient refuse heaps that tell us our ancestors also hated doing dishes. But this thing? This was different. The relic was roughly cylindrical, about the length of my forearm, with a surface that seemed to shift between metallic and organic depending on the angle of observation. It had been recovered from a dead world in the outer fringe, buried beneath 3,000 meters of sediment that dated back before most current galactic civilizations had invented fire. Anything? Kelmar asked from his station across the lab. He was a Trevian, all 4 of his eyes blinking independently in that unsettling way his species had perfected. Nothing, I replied, trying not to sound as frustrated as I felt. It is inert. Completely and utterly inert. Perhaps it is broken, offered Yenna, our team's youngest member. She was a seraphath, her scales gleaming blue under the laboratory lights. I resisted the urge to throw something at her. Young scientists always thought everything was broken. The structural analysis shows 0 degradation. Whatever this object is made from, it has not aged a single quantum measure in over 40,000 standard years. Kelmar whistled, a sound that came out like grinding gears. That is older than the Valdrine Empire. Older than the Precursors even, I muttered. We had tried everything. Electromagnetic stimulation, gravitational manipulation, sonic resonance, thermal variation. We had even exposed it to 14 different types of radiation, some of which were technically illegal to generate in a laboratory setting. Nothing. The artifact simply sat there, mocking us with its complete and total indifference. That was when Director Halvin entered the lab, and my day went from frustrating to catastrophic. I am bringing in a consultant, she announced, her vocal sac inflating with self-importance. I turned slowly, my mandibles clicking in what I hoped conveyed polite interest rather than barely suppressed horror. A consultant? Director, with all respect? Our team has 300 combined years of experience in xenoarchaeology and ancient technologies. What could a consultant possibly offer that we have not already attempted? Director Halvin's eye stalks swiveled in different directions, a sign she was uncomfortable. Good. She should be. A fresh perspective, she said, which was administrator speak, for she had no idea. The consultant arrives tomorrow. Make the necessary preparations. She left before I could protest further. Kelmar waited until the door sealed before speaking. A consultant. Wonderful. Probably some overpaid theorist who has never touched an actual artifact in their entire career. At least they cannot make things worse, Yenna said optimistically. I was about to agree when the containment field flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for every alarm in the laboratory to simultaneously decide that now was an excellent time to have an existential crisis. The artifact had moved. Not much. Perhaps a few millimeters. But it had definitely, absolutely without question moved. Did anyone else see that? I asked, though my voice came out higher than intended. Containment field integrity is stable, Kelmar reported, his manipulators flying across his console. There was a momentary fluctuation, but it has normalized. I approached the containment field slowly, as if the artifact might suddenly decide to explode. It looked exactly the same as before. Inert. Lifeless. Mocking. Run a full diagnostic, I ordered. Everything. I want to know what changed. We worked through the night cycle. The diagnostics revealed nothing unusual. No energy spikes. No structural changes. No reason whatsoever for the artifact to have moved. By the time I finally dragged myself to my quarters, I was convinced I had imagined the whole thing. The consultant arrived precisely at morning shift change, which I suspected was deliberately calculated to cause maximum disruption. I was expecting a Valdrine, perhaps. They were known for theoretical work. Or maybe a Cortex, who claimed to have mystical insights into ancient technologies. Though this mostly involved a lot of dramatic hand-waving and the burning of scented oils, what I got was a human. Specifically a human female who looked to be in her early 20s by their species reckoning, carrying a bag that appeared to contain mostly snack foods and a datapad that had seen better decades. Hi, she said, extending her hand in that bizarre human greeting custom. I am Mira Cole. You must be Vorth. I stared at the offered appendage. You are the consultant? Guilty. She smiled, showing far too many teeth for comfort. Humans did that when they were happy. I reminded myself. It was not a threat display. Probably. I know what you are thinking. Human. Young. Probably still has student debt. But I promise I am very good at what I do. And what exactly do you do, Miss Cole? Kelmar asked, his skepticism evident in every syllable. I look at things that do not make sense and make them make sense, she replied cheerfully. Also, I have a minor in ancient linguistics and a major in being stubborn. That second one is not on my official resume, but it should be. Yenna brightened immediately. Young scientists always recognized each other. Have you worked with Precursor technology before? Not exactly, Mira admitted, following us through the laboratory. But I have worked with 7 different incomprehensible objects, and I eventually figured out 6 of them. The 7th turned out to be a very elaborate decorative paperweight, which technically counts as figuring it out. I was beginning to develop a headache. Humans did that to people. The artifact is in Containment Lab 3. I said, deciding that the fastest way to be rid of this consultant was to let her fail quickly and spectacularly. We have run every standard test. It remains completely inert. Inert is interesting, Mira said, which was possibly the most ridiculous statement I had heard all cycle. Nothing is truly inert. Everything responds to something. She stopped in front of the containment field, dropping her bag on the floor with a thud that suggested the snack foods were very dense. For a long moment she just stared at the artifact. Then she tilted her head. The artifact tilted with her. Not metaphorically, not in my imagination. The artifact, which had not responded to 40,000 years of entropy, 6 cycles of intensive testing, and enough energy to power a small station, physically tilted to match the angle of Mira Cole's head. Every alarm in the laboratory remained silent. The containment field held steady. The artifact simply moved, as if this was the most natural thing in the universe. Mira tilted her head the other direction. The artifact followed. Huh, she said. That is weird. Kelmar's voice box made a sound like a dying engine. Yenna's scales flashed white, a stress response. I suspected I was making some undignified noise as well, but my hearing had temporarily stopped processing information. Could someone tell me? Mira said slowly, still not taking her eyes off the artifact. Why an ancient relic is playing follow the leader with my head movements, I had absolutely no idea. Which was, considering my 3 decades of experience, approximately the most terrifying thing that had happened in my entire career. Miss Cole, I managed to say, my voice admirably steady, I think you should stop moving. Good idea. She froze in place. The artifact froze as well, locked at a 15-degree angle that matched her last head position. We all stood there for what felt like several years but was probably only 30 seconds. So, Mira said carefully, this is not normal behavior for ancient alien artifacts, right? Because I am new to this whole xenoarchaeology thing, and I would hate to assume. No, I replied. This is not normal. This is the opposite of normal. This is so far from normal that normal is a distant memory we vaguely recall from happier times. Mira nodded slightly. The artifact bobbed in response. She froze again. Okay, definitely stopping that. Kelmar had recovered enough to start running scans, his manipulators moving faster than I had ever seen. There is still no energy signature, no detectable field interaction. By every measure we possess, the artifact remains completely inert, except for the part where it is moving, Yenna added helpfully. Yes, thank you, Yenna. We all saw that part. Mira slowly raised one hand. The artifact did not respond. She moved her hand in a circle. Nothing. She jumped up and down twice. The artifact remained motionless. Only head movements, she said, more to herself than to us. Why only head movements? What is special about? She stopped talking abruptly, her eyes widening. Oh no, I have learned in my years of scientific research that when a human says those 2 words in that particular tone, terrible things are about to happen. Oh no, what? I demanded. It is not responding to movement, Mira said slowly. It is responding to perspective, to sight lines. She pulled out her datapad and started typing with the frantic energy of someone who has just realized something either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. To what? Kelmar asked. Mira looked up and her expression was somewhere between excited and terrified. It is tracking my eyes. She closed both eyes. The artifact went completely still, almost seeming to power down. She opened one eye. The artifact oriented toward that eye. She opened both eyes. The artifact centered itself between them. It is following my gaze, she whispered. A 40,000-year-old artifact, built by a species we know nothing about, and it is following my gaze. I wanted to argue. I wanted to point out that this was impossible, that objects do not simply respond to organic visual perception without any measurable energy transfer, that nothing in my entire understanding of physics, archaeology, or common sense supported what we were witnessing. Instead, I said what any good scientist says when confronted with the impossible. We need to run more tests. Mira grinned, that unsettling human expression of happiness. Now you are talking. The artifact still locked on her eyes seemed to pulse once. Very faintly. As if it was agreeing, or perhaps as if it was waking up. I decided not to think too hard about which possibility was worse. The Emergency Research Committee convened exactly 4 hours after the incident, which by galactic bureaucratic standards was practically instantaneous. This meant that everyone was appropriately terrified. Director Halvin sat at the head of the conference table, her eye stalks rigid with stress. Surrounding her were representatives from 6 different scientific disciplines, 2 security officers, and 1 very uncomfortable human consultant, who kept stealing glances at the observation window where the artifact was still visible in its containment field. Let me ensure I understand correctly, Director Halvin said, her vocal sac deflating slowly. This object, which has remained dormant for 40 millennia, has suddenly begun responding to the visual attention of Miss Cole specifically. That is correct, I confirmed, pulling up the data on the central display. We have tested 17 other species, 432 individuals. Nothing. Only Miss Cole triggers the response, and we have no idea why, added Kelmai, which was not helpful but was unfortunately accurate. Security Chief Rax leaned forward, his armored plates clicking together. Could this be a weapon? Some form of targeting system? Mira snorted, then immediately looked apologetic. Sorry, but no. If this was a weapon, it would be the least efficient weapon ever designed. What would it do? Politely maintain eye contact with me until I die of old age. Humor is inappropriate for this situation, Rax growled. Humor is extremely appropriate for this situation, Mira countered. Because the alternative is existential panic, and that helps nobody. I found myself agreeing with the human, which was deeply unsettling. We need to understand the mechanism, said Dr. Thren, our lead physicist. She was a Morvian, her crystalline body refracting the light into uncomfortable patterns. There must be some form of energy transfer we are not detecting. We have scanned across every known spectrum. I reminded her. There is nothing. Then we are not looking correctly, Thren insisted. Or, Mira said quietly, we are looking for the wrong thing entirely. Everyone turned to stare at her. She stood up, walking to the observation window. The artifact, even from this distance and through reinforced barriers, seemed to orient slightly in her direction. What if this is not technology at all? Not in the way we understand it. Everything is technology, Kelmar objected. The universe operates on physical principles. Energy, matter, force and field. Sure, Mira agreed. But what if this operates on a principle we have not categorized yet? What if there is something about consciousness itself that this object responds to? The room erupted into immediate scientific chaos. Dr. Thren was shouting about quantum mechanics. Kelmar was insisting that consciousness was an emergent property of neural activity and therefore still fundamentally physical. Security Chief Rax was muttering about containment protocols. Yenna was taking notes so frantically her datapad was smoking. Director Halvin inflated her vocal sac to maximum volume and produced a sound like a ship's horn. Everyone stopped talking. Miss Cole, she said with forced calm. You are suggesting that this artifact responds to something immeasurable and potentially metaphysical. This is not a scientific hypothesis. No, Mira agreed. It is not. It is a starting point for forming one. Look, I get it. This sounds ridiculous, but we have eliminated every conventional explanation. When you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be worth investigating. Desire recognized the quote, human philosopher. Detective fiction. Not typically cited in academic research. But the logic was sound. What do you propose? I asked. Mira turned back to face us. Let me interact with it. Directly. No containment field. The room exploded again. This time Director Halvin did not even try to restore order. Security Chief Rax was on his feet. Absolutely not. Protocol forbids direct contact with unidentified artifacts of unknown origin and unclear purpose. Protocol also said this thing was inert, Mira pointed out. How did that work out? She has a point, Yenna said, earning a sharp look from Kelmar. The risk is unacceptable, Rax insisted. The risk of doing nothing is worse, Mira countered. This object has been dormant for 40,000 years. It wakes up now. Why now? What changed? Maybe nothing. Or maybe something is coming. Something that knew humans would eventually find this. Something that wanted humans to find this. The silence that followed was oppressive. That is speculation, Dr. Thren said. But her voice lacked conviction. Everything is speculation until we test it, Mira replied. and we cannot test it while I am standing behind barriers and containment fields. This thing wants interaction, so let me interact with it. Director Halvin's eye stalks swiveled in every direction, a sign of deep internal conflict. If I authorize this, and something happens to you, the diplomatic consequences with the Human Federation will be severe. I will sign a waiver, Mira said immediately. Full acknowledgement of risk, complete personal responsibility, whatever you need. That is not how interstellar law works, I muttered. Then make it work, Mira said, and there was steel in her voice now, because we all know I am going in there eventually. The only question is whether we do this properly, with protocols and monitoring, or whether I wait until everyone goes home and sneak in at night. Security Chief Rax made a sound like grinding metal. You would not dare, Mira smiled sweetly. I absolutely would dare. I am human. We are biologically incapable of leaving mysterious ancient artifacts alone. It is why we keep finding them and you keep having to hire us as consultants. She was not wrong. Humans had a reputation for this exact behavior. Director Halvin deflated completely. Very well. But we do this with full safety measures. Medical team on standby. Energy dampening fields ready to deploy. And if anything seems dangerous, we pull you out immediately. Deal, Mira said. 2 hours later, we were back in Containment Lab 3. The artifact sat in the center of the room, containment field deactivated. Medical scanners were pointed at Mira from 6 different angles. I was monitoring energy readings. Kelmar was tracking structural changes and Yenna was running probability simulations that kept producing results like undefined and syntax error reality not found. Security Chief Rax stood by the emergency containment controls, one manipulator hovering over the activation switch. Mira stood at the entrance, taking slow breaths. Remember, I said through the communications link, at the first sign of danger, you retreat immediately. Define danger, Mira replied. Anything unusual. Vorth, this entire situation is unusual. Can you be more specific? Pain, disorientation, sudden urges to conquer the galaxy. Anything that feels wrong. Got it? No galaxy conquest. I can work with that. She stepped into the room. The artifact remained motionless. Mira walked slowly toward it, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. 3 meters away. 2 meters. 1 meter. She stopped just outside arm's reach. Hello, she said softly. The artifact pulsed once. The same faint pulse we had seen before. Okay, Mira said. That is either really good or really bad. I am choosing to interpret it as good. She raised her hand slowly, reaching toward the artifact. Miss Cole, Rax warned. I know. Just let me try something. Her fingers touched the surface. Every monitor in the laboratory went insane. Energy readings spiked across 17 different spectrums simultaneously. The artifact blazed with light, but not visible light. Something else. Something that made my vision blur and my secondary brain ache. Pull her out, Rax shouted, slamming the emergency containment activation. Nothing happened. The containment field did not deploy. The emergency systems did not respond. Every safety measure we had installed simply refused to function. Mira stood perfectly still, her hand on the artifact, her eyes wide and distant. Miata, I shouted through the communications link. Can you hear me? Say something. She did not respond. The artifact began to rise, floating upward with Mira's hand still touching its surface. She rose with it, her feet leaving the ground, and I realized with horror that the artifact was not lifting her. She was lifting it. No. That was not right either. They were lifting together. The light intensified and I saw patterns in it. Mathematical. Linguistic. Something that was both and neither. Information compressed into pure energy, flowing between the artifact and Mira in streams of data that should not exist. Cut the power to the room. Kelmar shouted. Already tried. Yenna responded. Nothing is responding. I abandoned my console and ran to the entrance of the containment room, despite Rax's shouted protests. The threshold felt strange, like pushing through water, but I forced myself through. Mira, I shouted again. Her eyes snapped to mine, and I saw that they were wrong. Not changed, just wrong. Like I was looking at something vast trying to fit itself into something small. It is okay, she said, but her voice was layered. Multiple frequencies, multiple intentions. It is not hurting me. It is talking. Talking? I repeated stupidly, asking, checking, making sure. She smiled, and it was her smile. Human. Genuine. It has been alone for so long. It needed to know if we were ready. Ready for what? The light pulsed brighter, and suddenly I understood. Not words, not language, pure concept transmitted directly into my consciousness. Images of a galaxy far younger than ours. Civilizations rising and falling. A network of these artifacts. Thousands of them, scattered across space and time. Waiting, watching, recording. And now, finally after 40,000 years, finding someone who could understand, not anyone, specifically human, because humans had something the builders of these artifacts recognized, something they had been looking for, something about the way human consciousness worked, the way humans perceived reality, that matched the frequency of whatever impossible technology these artifacts represented. The light faded gradually. Mira and the artifact descended slowly to the ground. When her feet touched the floor, she released the artifact and stumbled backward. I caught her before she fell. That, she said breathlessly, was incredibly intense. The artifact settled onto the floor, inert once more, but not dormant. I could feel the difference somehow. It was waiting. Patient. Satisfied. What happened? Director Halvin's voice came through the communications link, tight with panic. Mira looked up at me, and her eyes were her own again. Tired. Amazed. Slightly terrified. Completely human, I think, she said slowly. We just made first contact. Retroactive first contact, with a species that left these things behind as a message. And apparently, humans are the only ones who can read it. What does the message say? I asked. Mira's expression shifted to something between wonder and concern. It says they are coming back, and they want to know if we are ready to meet them. Actually meet them. All of us. Every species in this galaxy. She paused, looking at the artifact. And I think I just told them yes. In the observation room, every scientist, security officer, and administrator stood in stunned silence. Security Chief Rax found his voice first. We are all going to be fired. Probably. Mira agreed cheerfully. But look on the bright side. We just potentially changed the course of galactic history. That has to count for something. I looked at the artifact, sitting peacefully on the laboratory floor. 40,000 years old. Waiting for this exact moment. For this exact species. For this exact impossibly reckless human consultant who decided that ancient alien technology responding to her eye movements was an invitation rather than a warning. And somehow, impossibly, she had been right. I made a note to update my resume. Something told me the next few cycles were going to be extraordinarily complicated. But as I watched Mira grin at the artifact like they were old friends, and as I felt the subtle hum of something vast and ancient and patient stirring across the galaxy, I realized something important. Complicated was what humans did best. And for the first time in my career, I was genuinely excited to see what happened next. Even if we all got fired,